So, hello everyone, good afternoon, and warm welcome on behalf of the European Commission to today's OSOR webinar. It's a pleasure to see so many of you, and I hope it will be more very soon. So, as a part of the OSOR community, I hope that you really feel that you belong to this community. And ready to explore how local governments across Europe are making open source work in practice. Thanks to the authors of the study, that a multi-case study that we will be presenting today. So over the next 2 hours, you will hear about how local governments are, so that's, yes, we see the agenda, how local governments adopting, developing, and collaborating on open source solutions. This includes a short presentation because it's based on 5 case studies from citizen participation platform like Consul Democracy to smart city data platforms such as Golemio and practical services like OS2borgerPC, Parlameter, and Digitransit. All of them really very interesting cases. And most importantly, you will hear about practical lessons and recommendations that can inspire future projects at the local and European level. But the focus, of course, today it's the local level. So today we are very lucky to have an excellent group of speakers with us today. First, Johan Linåker from Research Institute in Sweden and Nicholas Gates from OpenForum Europe. They are both co-authors of the study who will guide us through the study key findings. Then we will also hear, you could see in the agenda, voices from the field lightning talk. So real life stories presented by Miruna Muscan, Director of Product at Code for Romania, who will share hands-on experience from civic tech projects that truly put communities first. And then Thomas Vandersten, Chief Technology Officer of Sambruk, who will bring years of experience in Swedish municipalities and will speak about the opportunities and challenges of adopting open source in practice. So we will see this presentation of the study, as I mentioned, 2 lightning talks, and then there will be panel discussions. But before we dive deeper into our program, I would like to take a moment to talk about OSOR for those that don't know us well yet. So it will be very fast because there are also some of you here that are here with us not for the first time. And then I also would like to highlight something important, namely the Interoperability Europe community. So first, regarding OSOR, for those that don't know us, this is the open source observatory run by the Commission for more than 60 years. And as the name indicates, we observe, we monitor what's going on in the open source ecosystem in Europe and beyond. Our main daily bread is really to do that and to publish news items about the most interesting findings, the most recent developments that are relevant to the public sector. This is our main focus, but of course not only. We look at policies around the world too. It results also not only in news cases, but also in monthly newsletter that I encourage you to subscribe to, because then you get an essence of our monthly findings there directly in your inbox. So far, we've published more than 120 case studies on development of open source within public administrations, country reports that we are updating regularly. Then, yeah, if I could see the presentation, that helps me what's still missing. And then we organize events. That's one of these example like today. And finally, more deeper analysis in the form of reports and studies. So you will hear about the one today. So if you could move to the next slide. To close the previous topic, I encourage you to join OSOR, to become a member and also publish about your experience and to engage with us better. I see that that there are some problems people are asking, so please try to help maybe in the chat. Interoperable Europe community, why I am mentioning it? This is something that is created in the framework of the Interoperable Europe Act. And as you can see, a lot of existing communities that were in this way or another linked to the topic of interoperability, now the idea is that they will become a backbone of this new community that is to assist Interoperable Europe board and the whole structure around it with their work. You can read about it more on the Interoperable Europe portal, but we would like to invite you to register, because this is the community that it's more formal and requires registration. But all people that have interest in open source, because of then different reasons, have really something at stake there, because they can participate in public consultations, which will be organized, and I think one of them is already going on. So there are some surveys sent to the members. Engage in annual online assembly. There is first one coming probably beginning of next year. I don't know the date yet. Contribute to the guidance documents and case studies by sharing your own experiences, and take part in working groups, peer reviews, and initiatives, taking real challenges that are linked to interoperability, but also because open source is one of key enablers of interoperability, so to the topic close to your heart. So I strongly encourage you to become part of this community, and it's an excellent way to amplify the impact of your own work and ensure that your voice regarding open source matters is heard at the European level. Now, one small note before we continue. I've been called to another important meeting and will unfortunately need to leave this workshop about 20 minutes. So I'm very sorry about that. It happens for the first time for me when it comes to OSOR. But that's life. But you will be in the excellent hands of our experienced OSOR team, who will guide you through the rest of the sessions and make sure everything runs smoothly. So you should see now in the screen the team. These are colleagues that are here today with us and will help you with any matter that you need, and will moderate the session. So as I said, I am leaving you in a very good hands. And that's it from my side. Thank you again for joining us. And with that, let me hand the floor to Johan and Nicholas to present the results of the study.
Hello, everyone. Can we pull up the next slide? And then we'll get started. Great. So I will introduce myself, and then I'll let Johan introduce himself, and then we are going to kind of take co-responsibility on presenting the findings of the study. So yeah, hopefully we might have time for one or two questions at the end, and then we'll go into our lightning talks with some of the other speakers who we profiled in our case studies. So my name is Nicholas Gates. I go by Nick. I'm a senior policy advisor at OpenForum Europe, where I've been for about a year and a half. And there I focus a lot on open source in the public sector, as well as issues related to funding and sustainability, both topics that I've gotten to address with this piece of research. And we were very excited to do one of the first comprehensive studies to dive into open source adoption and reuse in local governments. And we got a pretty wide remit to look at some really interesting areas and aspects of open source collaboration at this level of the public sector. And so we were really thrilled to put together the study and to look at the case studies that we profiled. Johan, over to you.
Thank you. My name is Johan Linåker. I'm a senior researcher at RISE, so that's the National Research Institutes in Sweden, and I'm a assistant professor at Lund University, also Sweden. And been working, supporting, researching organizations in the public sector and industry on open source and related topics for some time. So it was a pleasure and a great opportunity to be able to dive into the local government level, where there is a lot of extra challenges and a lot of but also a lot of opportunities for open source, as we'll see in the presentation.
And I should mention, we had two additional contributors to the study who are also co-authors. Yanis Shermuziadis, who was formerly with OpenForum Europe, is now with Sensenelec. He's also joining us on the call, just listening. And Simon Weber from Wavestone. They really supported the production of this study as well. Next slide. Great. So our study is titled Open Source Software Adoption and Reuse in European Local Governments, a multiple case study. This was a piece of comparative research. So what we really sought to do was to look at a number of different case studies that tackled different areas of open source collaboration in the local public sector, and to kind of really lift up some lessons from those case studies. So what we started out with is taking a deductive approach. So we did a mapping, and we tried to identify case studies across a number of different profiles and archetypes. And we used that to inform the selection and shortlisting of a number of case studies. But then what we did is we kind of left all that behind, and we kind of really dove into the case studies themselves and said, what are they telling us? And we really tried to lift up lessons that we think can be relevant for other people that are working on open source adoption and reuse at the local level. So we arrived at a number of perspectives that we think are important to consider, and we'll enumerate those later. And then we also outline a series of recommendations. But what I really wanted to start with is just briefly telling you about, kind of how we conducted the study, and then I'll talk about some of the case studies that we featured. Next slide. Next slide. So as I mentioned, public sector organizations, or PSOs, at the level of local government are really one of the most active kind of bases of public sector support for open source. While national public sector bodies get a lot of attention, what we see frequently through the Open Source Observatory is that a lot of the tangible action that's happening is really at the local level. One of the reasons for that is that there's a lot of scope to experiment and to look at different possibilities for collaboration, and also just the freedom to kind of experiment. So this is a really interesting unit of analysis. Despite that, we recognize that there was a gap in the literature in terms of comprehensive comparative research on what adoption and collaboration actually looks like at this level. And so our goal for this research project was to really explore collaborative development and maintenance, how it's structured and executed, and then specifically also look at creation and reuse, so cross-border sharing, interoperability, all of the questions that are really relevant to OSOR, especially in the context of the Interoperable Europe Act. Next slide. So we started very briefly doing a literature review. Simon was very involved in that. We reviewed over 60 papers, analyzed over 30 of them, and we incorporated over 15 papers in the written document. I myself mapped over 1,000 projects, policies, institutions, and activities, and a lot of that data has been generated for the use of the Open Source Observatory more broadly. And then together with our research team that I mentioned, we conducted over 19 interviews with 21 people across 5 case studies. That was the research process that we undertook. Next slide. We used a few archetypes to guide selection, as I mentioned. So we were really interested in the idea of international and well-adopted open source solutions. So those ones that many people have heard of and are adopted by a foundation. Ones where there was international collaboration taking place, but there was less evidence of adoption. Local open source solutions developed by non-public sector bodies that were being reused. Local open source solutions developed by public or kind of quasi-public sector bodies. So for example, and we'll talk about this in the Golemio example, like a municipal stock agency. So kind of semi-private companies, but that are actually funded primarily by the government. There was national intercity collaborations around an open source solution, local open source solutions developed within a given city, and even regional adoption and customization of an existing general project for local needs. So we really recognize that there's a lot of different ways in which open source collaboration is happening, and we sought to use some of those ideas to kind of inform how we selected case studies so that we got a representative sample of where the need or kind of incentive for adoption comes from, but then also how it's actually being used in process and what the mechanics of that collaboration are. Next slide. So I'll go into the case studies very briefly. Johan, feel free to jump in if you want to add anything. But we had 5 case studies, and they kind of broadly followed on some of those archetypes that you meant. And then we'll talk about some of the perspectives and the lessons we learned from them overall later in the presentation. So first up, we have Consul Democracy. So Consul Democracy is one of the leading civic participation platforms that's available and is being used widely across Europe. It's a very mature solution. It's been active since 2015, 2016. And while it originated out of the city of Madrid, it's been rapidly adopted across municipalities in Spain, but has also expanded very quickly across Europe and indeed the rest of the world. The scope of Consul Democracy is really interesting because you see a really homegrown solution that emerged to a very specific use case. There was a lot of political change happening in that period in Spain. And so you saw a lot of kind of very progressive governments taking over in local governments across the country. And what they were really trying to do was figure out different ways to engage with citizens. And so there was a really deep desire that was really rooted in the Spanish context. But what became clear is that there was also a demand for that all across the rest of the world. And there was a real movement towards direct citizen engagement and direct democracy. And so Consul has really emerged into that kind of space, and it's become one of the leading open source solutions and is now hosted by the Consul Foundation as of 2019. We learned a lot of lessons by looking at Consul, namely around kind of financial sustainability, both the challenges that are available or that are prevalent for open source solutions that are trying to be spun out of public sector bodies, but also some of the diverse funding streams they're pursuing and some of the successes they've had. We learned a lot about what it means to develop effective governance structures when a solution emerges in this way, and what it means for a solution to be transferred in terms of its kind of stewardship to an open source foundation. We saw really strong community engagement. We were really impressed to learn about ConsulCon and the robust online community that engages with Consul and all of the collaboration that was happening organically and has now been formalized through some of the structures enabled by the Consul Democracy Foundation. We also learned a lot about kind of, how governments engage with these projects. So we spoke to, I think, 4 or 5 different local government adopters of Consul. And so we were able to take kind of a comparative approach within this comparative study and really look at how those different municipalities or regions were adopting and using Consul in very different ways. And we're able to learn some lessons therein. So in this sense, Consul is one of our larger case studies, but we really learned a lot about kind of technical decisions, governance, and the trade-offs between the two, as well as funding and sustainability issues. Next slide. Next up was OS2borgerPC and MedborgarPC. So Thomas will later talk about this in the context of how Sambruk was able to engage with this collaboration. But really what we saw here was a solution that emerged in the Danish public sector, OS2borgerPC, which was a packaged version of the open source software operating system Ubuntu. And it was being used primarily on library PCs. And then we saw a lot of interest to kind of expand this. And so eventually, in collaboration with Magenta, an IT provider from Denmark, it was scaled out of the Aarhus municipality, and it was turned over to OS2, who has facilitated collaboration around the project in the Danish context. But also Magenta does a lot of engagement with the project itself. And so there's kind of many different ways that municipalities engage with the project, sometimes through Magenta, but also sometimes through the OS2 association. So there's a lot of interesting governance dynamics in terms of how different stakeholders engage with the project and the different incentives they had. But then the really interesting aspect for us was the cross-border sharing. So we later saw that the project was introduced in Sweden through Sambruk, which is a Swedish municipal association of about 150 municipalities. And then there was really kind of sustained collaboration in Sweden as well, at a lower level than in Denmark, but certainly it was just beginning when we started to look into the project. So yeah, from this case study, we learned a lot about governance and maintenance of OS projects, what the dynamics of kind of dealing with suppliers and sharing across borders looks like. And we also learned a lot about procurement and kind of how local municipalities that really don't have a lot of capacity can engage with associations or IT providers to support the adoption and reuse of these types of solutions. Next slide. Golemio was a very different case study for us. So Golemio is a smart city data platform. It's developed and maintained by Operator ICT, which is a joint stock company fully owned by the city of Prague. The platform integrates and manages a lot of data from various urban systems, though it has a focus in particular on public transportation. So this is an example of a solution that was developed and purpose-built specifically for the use case of the Prague city government. And then what they really did is they kind of created a spirit of open source collaboration and open source principles within the city. So there wasn't a lot of collaboration happening on the platform from outside the Prague municipal context. But what we really saw is that multiple agencies in Prague were able to come on board and engage in the project in a way that mirrored open source principles. And the project was put under an MIT license. So even though there wasn't a lot of collaboration from outside, it was open. And we did see kind of a lot of collaboration across the public sector, which was really interesting for us. And there was also some demand coming from other regions in Czechia to collaborate on this project as well. For us, while this was unique in the sense that it wasn't, a federated network of open source developers from all across the world, it really showcased some of the other incentives that go into kind of municipal collaboration around open source software, whether it's attracting developers and retaining their talent, or just kind of enabling, the public sector itself to work more in the open. So we saw a lot of how this was able to build up trust with stakeholders, how it influenced code quality, but also how cross-departmental collaboration and continuous stakeholder engagement were critical for the continued success of the project. And it's a really successful example of really working to address local solutions first and foremost, local problems first and foremost. Next slide. Parlameter is a really interesting project. So we purposefully tried to represent geographies from all across Europe, and Parlameter is very active in Central and Eastern Europe. Parlameter originated through a civil society organization called Danes of Dan, and it's expanded to use in Bosnia and Herzegovina as well as Croatia. There was also some collaborations that were attempted in Poland and Ukraine, but that stalled out. Really what Parlameter is all about is on kind of monitoring for parliaments. So it helps those that are interested in parliamentary activities to get detailed analytics, such as how members vote, their meetings, and overall performance. What was really interesting about the Parlameter case was Danes of Dan. So Danes of Dan is a nonprofit, so they're not a traditional service supplier, but what they really did is develop really close relationships that were very tailored to each municipal context. And they really worked closely with the municipality and in some cases the national government to tailor the use of the service and really encourage people to become kind of active users rather than passive users, even though they were the ones doing most of the actual code contribution. So I think this is a really interesting model because it speaks to contexts where there might not be a high capacity for contribution to open source, but they're really interested in principles of open source collaboration and working in the open. And so Danes of Dan was able to really work with them on that. And it also served as a bridge to engaging in other areas, whether it was open data or civic participation. So yeah, a lot of really interesting lessons here that we'll talk about more later. Next slide. And then one of our last collaborations was Digitransit. So Digitransit has a lot of unique dynamics. Digitransit was partially based on OpenTripPlanner, which is an existing municipal inter-municipal collaboration that was already taking place. There was some technology coming from the United States, but there was also collaboration from the Norwegian government. And then what they did in the Finnish context is they built on top of OpenTripPlanner, and they really built a system that was kind of customized to the needs of the Helsinki region. And then there was also a lot of collaboration, kind of like with Golemio, from other public sector bodies, either within or surrounding Helsinki. We also saw a lot of collaboration that started to happen nationally from other Finnish municipalities as well. So what's interesting here for me is the really kind of overlapping spheres of influence. On the one hand, you have this very dynamic and robust OpenTripPlanner community, but you also have kind of the Finnish Digitransit community, and the two are kind of overlapping. And there was a lot of really interesting dynamics by which the developers from multiple different government agencies in Finland were actually interacting with the OpenTripPlanner community, but also with each other, and really trying to scale and localize this solution for the Finnish transportation system. They learned a lot about the use of standards around scalability, localization, and really what it means to work upstream across communities and projects. That's all we have in terms of our case studies. Johan's going to talk a little bit around some of the specific lessons that we learned, as well as present some archetypes that we developed to help people think about these types of collaborations more broadly.
Great. Okay, so we've seen all of these great examples, but also examples within the examples. Like Nick said, in Consul, we saw many patterns of how collaboration happens. How, for example, Munich, through their own resources, creating an OSPO and really adopting Consul together with a vendor on their own, and we're seeing like KASLA, the Scottish Association of Municipalities, taking it in and developing and distributing along its members, and we're seeing, as we'll hear about from Coda Romania, how they take it and provide it to their various municipalities in Romania. But then if we start like trying to generalize across the many cases and examples of collaborations within the cases, we start seeing like blueprints, archetypes, structures for how collaboration, adoption of open source, sharing or reuse can be enabled on the local level. And this is really a triangle here, where we consider both the local government perspective, we consider the community perspective, and how collaboration can be facilitated, stewarded, and then also how this void that often occurs within municipalities in terms of lack of resources, how that can be filled from a supplier side, which is much more nuanced than just the typical private suppliers, which we will talk about. So really think of this as a triangle where all parts are equally important for at least for when you look long term for sustainable collaboration, at least how we see it, looking from the case studies and other studies as well. But okay, so focusing on starting up from the local government perspective, and this is really about how can local governments grow the capabilities necessary to initiate, collaborate, share, and reuse open source software. And public sector, especially on the local level, it has a long tradition of outsourcing or sourcing technical capabilities outside of their own house, so to say. They use consultancies, external IT firms, suppliers, service providers, to provide the necessary know-how and capabilities to help them with their digital transformation and so on. So this is maybe the typical way in how you build up capabilities, but we also see other ways than just entrusting suppliers. We've also seen these examples of that you can compare to the open source foundations typically found in the broader industry and community open source ecosystem, where you have they act as stewards and help competitors and partners collaborate in a neutral ground, providing a governance setup, processes, and so on. And this is what we've seen for example, in the council case with the Consul Democracy Foundation, which provides this application-centric foundation helping local governments across borders internationally to collaborate and engage and in a neutral setting that transcends these national and local government borders, acting as a steward for the project, housing the governance and so on. Really key to enable this collaboration. A risk with this setup is that there can be a too great of a distance, as we saw with the city of Groningen in the Netherlands, who experience a too far of a distance in terms of language, culture, and use cases. So they transition to a Dutch alternative instead. But still, these foundations of stewards play a critical role in enabling this and provides a way of local governments to pool resources. And that can also be on the national level through national local government associations such as Sambruk in Sweden, such as OS2 in Denmark, such as Agilacti in France, such as Open Cities in the Czech Republic, and list goes on. So that's one way of building capabilities together. Then you have local governments that are more resourceful, that has the capabilities to build their own internal or the resources to build their own internal capabilities. Paris has been a leading example in the open source space. But looking at the cases, we can highlight both Madrid, Barcelona, and the city of Munich as very resourceful municipalities or local governments, where we've seen these projects come out as a Decidim Council from Madrid and Barcelona, and Munich, who's created their own OSOR and actively goes in and sponsors the development of Consul, really playing a role. As we've seen in previous studies, is that these larger, more resourceful organizations, they are needed to lead the development, lead the adoption, and so on. So they are very critical for this whole ecosystem to function. And then the third way of growing these capabilities is as Nick exemplified through Operator ICT, this public service provider owned by the city of Prague. And we've seen other examples as well, as PagoPA, owned by the Ministry of Finance in Italy, or I think I saw Leo here in the crowd, and also IMIO, for example, collaboration with 120 plus Wallonian municipalities. And also we've seen Valti, co-owned municipal service provider in the case of Digitransit. So these companies, public companies, they create a suit where they can be more free and they can work in a more agile and open way together with their owners, their stakeholders. So that's another way to combine maybe some things from the private into the public, which is also a nice, interesting way of building these capabilities. Next slide. And then from the more community perspective, and then how can these local governments collaborate, and how can we find a sustainable hosting and a home for these projects long term? Because sooner or later, projects, if they sustain themselves and continue to grow, they will outgrow their local government hosts. We've seen many examples of this, where how local governments aren't really set up to own and drive the development long term. So there needs to be a home for these projects, a sustainable home long term that can enable the community to grow and enable others to contribute to the sustainability, both financially and through code and so on. And as we mentioned, the Consul Democracy Foundation is a great example that has managed to outlive the withdrawal from the city of Madrid, which really exemplifies this risk of putting too many eggs in the same basket, or sustainability-wise on one single vendor, or one single maintainer, or one single public entity. You need to diverse and improve the robustness of these communities. So they here, such foundations play a very important role. And then on the more national levels, we can talk about national provider-oriented associations or development-oriented associations. A provider-oriented association is what I would consider Sambruk, and here, Thomas, you're free to contradict me or argue against in your talk afterwards. But as I see it, this is the case where municipalities get together through a common association and generally reuse what's out there already, tailor it, and have a common voice towards the vendor. But it's about reusing, and in contrary to the more national development oriented associations, which are more geared towards enabling their members to create new projects, maybe more like a traditional open source foundations to in the broader industry community space. But I think, and there could be a spectrum here as well, of course. But these are more. There are different ways in how communities can engage through these proxy organizations, these umbrellas or steers, however you call them. But they are typically very critical for if you want to have sustained hosting and home for these products going long term. Next slide. And then, as I talk about these capabilities that's needed, these can be provided by various types of suppliers. It's not just the typical private suppliers. There's also the more civil society service providers, as we've seen with Vandersten or Coding for Romania, which I would like to highlight here as very interesting and very successful examples, where the civil society comes in and fills a void where, in cases where digital transformation isn't on the top prio of the government's list of things to do, but still needed for a democratic and digitally equal society, both nationally and looking at the European stage. So these play a very critical role, and it's really to get the ball going and find the critical areas that needs to be improved, and they can play an important bridge to the more general hackerspace or society of people who want to, of citizens who want to contribute and help enable the adoption, as we saw with Parlameter, as Nick highlighted. So they play a very important role in a lot of spaces, and I think that their importance will only continue to grow, especially for highlight these good examples that we have. Then we have the more local government-owned service suppliers, as I mentioned, Operator ICT, which offers a new way of developing, a new way of driving open and agile collaboration and development within the city of Prague. They enable a more open source way of working, which can attract a talented workforce that maybe otherwise would not be possible. They enable the ability for the city to become more sovereign, which we can make the comparisons to Pagopa, which takes in Italy how they grow their own internal capabilities on a more national level to become more vendor independent and more autonomous. And then we have the private suppliers as well, and they are really critical and really important, and definitely not downplaying them when talking about the others. And these we need more of them, and we need to support them, and we need a better way for a better way of collaborating and engaging them in the development, in the governance, and so on. There needs to be a better interplay between local governments and these suppliers throughout the tendering process, and then throughout the development and maintenance process. As we saw in the case of OS2borgerPC, it's really important that the local governments are active in the maintenance, so they don't drop the ball. Things need to be maintained, and the suppliers continue to maintain the projects. So they need active engagement from the local governments, who otherwise maybe only meets once in a quarter. And also likewise, there needs to be an understanding from the procurement side how the market looks. We need to ensure that there is a sustainable market turnover, so room for sustainable business models and so on, and how services are provided or tendered, so that also you don't just buy the hosting, you also buy the maintenance to ensure that the projects are maintained. That's super important. So a healthy open source project equals healthy maintenance equals healthy vendors and suppliers. So this is something we need to highlight. I think then we can move to the recommendations maybe. And then it's all cases are really different. I mean, there are many things that generalize across local governments, but it's also important to recognize that each government is also unique in a sense to its population, geographic and cultural locations and so on. So it's really important on the local level to analyze what kind of capabilities do we have, what do we need, what kind of challenges and barriers are we experiencing, and really come up with their own set of policy or direction where we want to go. But then it's also important to recognize that there are other municipalities and local governments facing the same problems, same issues, and that this is something that you can collaborate on and really find a common direction and when defining policies, and here associations such as OS2 Sambruk can interplay and provide this mapping, help support with this mapping of the challenges and so on. So in a sense, these associations play much of the role as an OSPO. I would, as an open source program officer, as there's a lot of talk about, we in a previous report we did for the commission, we talked about association-based OSPOs, and this is what how I could describe them also. Next slide, maybe. And then it's also important to think about that you design these solutions with interoperability and reuse in mind from day one. If that isn't in place from the start, from the get-go, it will be considered too expensive, too difficult to implement as an afterthought. There won't single municipalities. They are focused on their use case, on their while their requirements. They are not like typically interested in we should have general localization support. But if we get this in from the beginning, the sharing and reuse will be so much more simplified. There needs to be a thought about the formats, the data formats, and the standards, the interfaces, the APIs that these are open and standardized from the get-go to enable share and reuse both nationally and definitely cross-border. And then there's this, as we saw in the case of Golemio, there's a need to think about how you can start adopting an open and agile culture and practice in your development and in your procurement process. And in my mind, this comes before many things. If we can find an agile way of doing procurement and collaborating in a better way, that will save so much cost and value, which then can be further improved by going a more open way, of course. And then also consider, as we've seen with the city of Munich, how local governments need to think about the sustainability and the support for the products. You need to consider maintenance, as I said, as part of the tendering process. It needs to be a requirement that a certain part of the budget or time needs to go to maintenance. We can talk about the central FOSS fund, but if we don't delegate or decentralize the sustainability efforts out to where it's happening, like the CRA is doing, then we won't go anywhere. Next slide. Yeah, and think about local governments as a way to local government association, as we talked about, as a way of coordinating and enabling co-funding and stewarding of these projects, and how we can use these in the long term and sustainable hosting of the projects and enable collaboration long term, because sooner or later projects will outgrow the local government who maybe initiated. There's an example of this if we look at the city of Amsterdam and the Signalen project, how they are trying to move it outhouse to the Dutch National Association of Municipalities. And talking about number 9, we mentioned this need to consider how you procure from the vendors and suppliers that you maybe there's too small of a market to procure from 2 or 3 vendors. Maybe if to have sustainability, you can only procure from one vendor, but then you must have different mechanisms in place that you ensure that things stay open so that you don't end up in a vendor lock-in. This can be ensured through several ways. But it needs to be there. There's a knowledge and know-how that needs to be there, which maybe not the typical local government has. Again, where these national associations, for example, can come in and support. And also think about what kind of national associations or ways of collaborating are there already. Do we need a new structure, or can we reuse Gratis, or is it too much of a cultural heritage and a backpack already that hinders this development? So there might be a way of thinking in new terms and lines. I think this was the last recommendation. We do have one slide more. Yeah, we had 2 more. Yeah, again, early consider where you want these things to go in terms of having a home, and in this, when you set up the governance and the development, involve the suppliers in the development. You still need a safe room where the local governments can talk about procurement and a more owner specific matters, but suppliers needs to be engaged in the technical governance, and that form is also for the supplier to engage the local governments equally. So there is a need for dynamics and activity here to really enable open and agile collaboration. Nick, do you have any things to fill in? I just trained on.
So.
Sorry.
No worries. I think we covered everything. I believe what we're going to do is move straight on into our next presentations, and then we'll have more time during the panel for questions on the findings of the report in particular. So next up, I believe we wanted to introduce Miruna Muscan from Code for Romania, or did we want to do Thomas first? I forget. Cindy, please correct me if I'm wrong. Well, go to the next.
We can't hear you, Cindy.
Go to the next slide then, and we'll find out. I forget who we had up first. Next slide, please. So we actually had Thomas first. Great. So yeah, first up we'll have Thomas Vandersten. Thomas is from Sambruk, and he's going to talk about some of the work that he's doing in the Swedish context. Thomas, over to you.
Thank you so much. Ping. Next slide. Sambruk. I represent Sambruk, and we are an association. I try to explain the name. Sam means together, and Bruk means use. So use together. That's more or less our name then. We are representing today about 160 members in Sweden. All of them are public organizations. Most of them are local municipalities, and more than half of the Swedish 290 municipalities are members of Sambruk. Yeah, that's more or less ping. Sorry, yeah, you just hold a bit there. Yeah, we are a non-profit organization. I want to say that too, and I want to address the procurement issue that Johan spoke about now. That's a main part of what Sambruk do actually, since we the members, they can just use what we have in our portfolio, since we have done procurement already, and we fulfill a kind of an exception in the local procurement laws in Sweden. So they don't need to procure it themselves; they can just use it, and it makes it quite easy to use the digital objects that we have in our portfolio for the members. We have been working for about 20 plus years, and we are 6 employees in Sweden. But now over to MedborgarPC. And that is a platform, as explained before, an open source solution for centrally administering and managing secure public computers. It means that a very low PC with a low specification can be enrolled on an Ubuntu release and then used in public spaces. We thought that was a really good thing that we really needed to adopt for our members, and did work there to translate it. We can move to the next slide. We found this, it is developed as OS2borgerPC. We brought it to Sweden and translated it to MedborgarPC because that makes more sense in Sweden. And the company that did that was Magenta, who has developed the solution from the start. But moving to the next slide, I have a small timeline. How did we do this? It started in February 2023, with a webinar. I'm always on the lookout, me and my colleagues, for stuff that can be useful for our members. That's more or less our mission. One of our missions as employees at Sambruk to find useful things for the members and stuff that they can collaborate around. And we listened to OS2, and they showed us MedborgarPC. We had a meeting with Magenta, who developed it, and we had also a meeting with OS2. And then we, in March, did the translation of the digital object as such. I did it myself. It took 3 days, and I don't. The important thing here is it was quite simple to do it. That's my bottom line with that statement. Then we developed a number of functions that weren't in the platform. Amongst them was a possibility to book a PC in a library, and also to have SMS logins. So it was a number of developments there that we did, and we communicated that to the responsible person in OS2 at that time. In 2024, we rolled out the first users in Sweden, and now we have 9 organizations, public organizations, using MedborgarPC in Sweden. And a really interesting thing that has happened quite recently, that's the Swedish municipality called Laholm. They have now rolled out over 200 of these installations to student PCs. So they are going beyond the original scope to have it in public libraries or in other places. They think it is really useful to enroll the student PCs on MedborgarPC. So they have high ambitions there, and I think that is something that could be developed much further, to have a separate kind of flavor of MedborgarPC just aimed to students. So that's where we are today. Ping. yeah, that's yeah, exactly. And then we are the relationships between the partners in this case. Then, what is Sambruk's role here? We have agreements, contracts with Magenta as the open source person here, the organization here. They are doing the hosting and the maintenance and the development. So we have a contract with them. We also have contracts with all of the organizations, our members that are using MedborgarPC. So we are in the middle as a middleman between the vendor in this case and the organizations. And over here to the right, we have the end users that are using MedborgarPC. Everything is stored in a shared repository. And that repository is, the owner of the repository is Magenta. So they, everything that we have developed are released in those repositories that they have in GitHub there. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, and I want to say something about Sambruk's role regarding collaboration. And our main role always is to facilitate cooperation, collaboration between different parts, between our members and other parties in society. We coordinate a board consisting of one representative from each organization that are using the object in question, and now MedborgarPC. We call them förvaltningsråd. These förvaltningsråd, these boards, crowdfunds development, maintenance, and coordination of the work on the object itself. So we have plans and lists of requests to develop the object further, and also to gather money in order to make it happen. Then we in dialogue with the procured vendors, we develop stuff like stuff for the object itself, and then we go on. So we have a yearly plan often that we agree upon in this board, and then we communicate that to the vendor, and then they start working. We have developed a little system to have plans and stuff like that in order, because we're starting to have kind of a lot of different objects. We work with both open source but also with an own internal kind of open source within Sambruk context. So we have two kind of legs that we're standing on there. Yeah, so and Magenta, they work with both Sambruk and OS2, so that could be nice to know also. We had a plan, we have still a plan that the Swedish board should communicate with OS2 with their equivalent, but we haven't done that yet, and that is something that we need to do. So we haven't had so much communication with OS2, even that they have taken the first initiative to the solution. Next slide. Yeah, what have we done? Some kind of summary of what we have done. We have searched for open source products. We do that all the time. Then we have done a market analysis. Is there anything else on the market? Because we try to avoid being too competitive with the open market. It cannot be avoided. We are always doing some competition. But if there would have been a number of solutions competing on the Swedish market, we might not have gone into this. But there weren't. So we translated the parts that needed translation. And when I say needed, we didn't translate the back office parts, more or less, the administrative things, just the front end that is to the users. Then we procured hosting, maintenance, and support. We developed new functionality. We created contracts and internal business models. So we saw that if we charge this and that for this object to the members, then we have a sustainable business model. That is, my salary or the person working with it is paid to a part by this, the coordination part that Sambruk is contributing with, and all the other stuff. So the vendor gets their part too. Then we communicated to our members, this is available, please start using it. And that's what we have done. Next slide. No, yeah, I think it is the next slide. Yeah. What could we have done better? Before we entered into this object, we have learned now that we should have done some kind of code review because we didn't do that. We were a little bit naive there, and but luckily enough, it's great code. It's written by a great vendor, and it is high quality. We didn't analyze the community as such. This community is not so very big, but if now we are, for example, we are looking into, we have created or put together a open source technical stack of different AI components, and there we work a lot with analyzing the community because that's a very vital part. We didn't do that. We took in MedborgarPC, and we could have communicated better to our members that what we were doing, and also afterwards, so we could be better of the communication part. You can always communicate better. Next slide. Some other thoughts I want to share with you that is maybe not specifically relatable to MedborgarPC. The first one thing I want to say, it's not spelled out on this slide, but it is, we are planning now, we will have a hackathon after New Year's in February, where we will use MedborgarPC as a basis to build what we call a break the glass application. And that's our aim there is to develop something that can enable an organization to, let's say, limp digitally after everything goes bad. So that's a hackathon we will launch in February next year. But other thoughts is that we have analyzed a lot of open source components coming from here and there, both big objects, but also minor objects, objects developed in the public sector. And when we have looked into them, it shows that they are not open source at all. They have proprietary components in them, and so the SBOM analysis is quite important, and we have learned that. And then to round off with a question, and I don't have an answer to this. Is it better to invest in a large open source object with a high development speed that is used by many organizations and is versatile, than to invest in a smaller object with fewer organizations and a more narrow scope but better suited to your needs? We have been struggling with that question in some cases. Yeah, that's it more or less.
Thank you, Thomas.
Great. Thank you so much to Thomas for sharing his presentation. We have a few minutes for question and answer. Did anybody want to jump in with a question? You can either post it in the chat or come off mic and ask. Any questions for Thomas? Okay, we had a question from Gabriella in the chat. As more of your members come to use the tool, does the pricing model change? Maybe you could help us clarify that, Thomas.
No, the pricing model as such is usually quite often the pricing models we have in Sambruk is based on the number of people living in the actual municipality. So large municipalities pay more, but in this object here, they pay for it is based on the PC number of PCs using MedborgarPC, and it's kind of a staired model. So it doesn't matter how many organizations use it.
Great. If you have any direct reactions, please feel free to share them in the chat. If you have any questions for our panelists, though, let us know, and we'll have more time in the question and answer to share reactions and then kind of react to them ourselves. Great. So I think we'll move straight on into Miruna's presentation then. So next up is Miruna Muscan. Miruna works for Code for Romania. We first came into contact with Miruna when we were working on the Consul case study, because Code for Romania helped to do the integration of Consul in a few municipalities across the country. So Miruna is going to talk a little bit about that work, but she'll also focus on the larger kind of context of local government adoption and reuse of open source software in Romania. Miruna, over to you.
Hey, hello everyone. Thanks for having me here and inviting me to this webinar. Just give me a second to share my presentation because I've prepared it. And please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome. Okay, so hello everyone. Thanks for being here. Today I will tell you a bit about how open source is currently viewed in Romania. And this is why I chose this theme for my presentation, because as you can see, it looks kind of old and familiar. It's something that I would say currently the Romanian local governments are not used to. We also have some successful stories that Nicholas already introduced, which is regarding the implementation of Consul Democracy solutions in some municipalities. But I will also like to share with you some challenges that we've seen so far in the implementation of and adoption of open source. So just a bit of context of who I am and why I'm here. So I've been part of the Code for Romania team for over 4 years now. Code for Romania is a non-profit organization based in Romania that has been founded almost 10 years ago. And its mission is to build and maintain open source solutions for social good, which means that the solutions that we build are meant to solve problems that we have in our society. In the last years, we've also created an international branch called Commit Global, which basically takes the open source solutions that we've built in Romania and takes them further in the international world. Because as was already mentioned in the beginning when Johan and Nicholas shared the results of the study, some of the problems that we have in different local national levels can be the same problems that can be solved with reusing software in other ways. So yes, this is pretty much why I'm here. I'm of course an open source enthusiast. I love to talk about this subject. So yeah, I will go straight into why open source and why, as an organization, we chose this mission. So just to give you a bit more context, the solutions that we build have different pillars of actions. And basically, we are aiming to solve different kinds of problems, let's say. And why open source? Why are we building open source solutions? Is because probably some of you already are familiar with the benefits of open source, but in general, open source definitely brings more transparency and accountability, because you can actually see how that code works, and you can actually make sure that it doesn't has any dark patterns inside it. So this may sound very simple, but it's actually a great thing. Then of course the cost efficiency and flexibility, and when I say that, I don't only mean in terms of maintenance, but also in the long-term sustainability of a product or a project, if we talk about implementation. So because you pay once to build something that can be reused in different other ways, and that can and perhaps you just get to reuse something that was already tested, deployed, and you already have some previous experiences that you can relate to. So from this perspective, this is a benefit rather than starting something from scratch and testing it out yourself. Then of course, the digital sovereignty, which has been a recurring theme in the past 2 years at least. I've heard it very often. But it's especially when we talk about local governments, it's very important to not be locked in by vendors, which I will get into more later, but it's a problem. It's a recurring problem here in Romania. A lot of municipalities and a lot of even smaller governmental agencies get locked in by different vendors, and basically they cannot use tools that they need and they paid for. And of course, open source is a tool to innovate, because open source by default comes with a community-driven, let's say, initiative. So you will have a lot of people that will come in and actually can innovate your product and make it better, or the product that you are going to use. So this is why, as an organization, we believe that open source is it's a practice and a thing that that can solve a lot of things, especially when used in the right ways. So I will go a bit further and go straight into the subject with the situation in Romania. So, as I was telling you earlier, we as an organization have different pillars of action, which include building humanitarian tools that help humanitarian workers, or we build tools that help NGOs, so other non-profit organizations, build capacity. We also build tools for public institutions. So by nature, the fact that you build open source tools in a modular way helps you actually get different use cases for those tools. Aside from building tools from scratch, we are also on the lookout for other tools that can solve problems that we identify. So in the past 5 years, we've conducted very large research program called Civic Labs, in which we looked at different parts and different domains here in Romania, of problems that could be solved, or not necessarily solved, but at least helped to and unblock and uncluster with the use of technology. So this is just about a bit of context about what kind of tools we use or we implement. So throughout our experience, we also implemented tools and helped local municipalities implement tools for needs that they have. And so far, even though the principles of reusability and sharing are like a European standard, or should be a European standard so far, they didn't really manage to get in Romania as well. So right now, from our perspectives and the municipalities that we interacted with so far, there is a limited, very limited, but somewhere in the larger municipalities growing awareness of open source. So some of them learn about it because others tell them about it. We also tried to show them the benefits and make them understand how that could actually benefit even their budgets, but without having a coherent strategy that comes from a central level, from like the government, then you cannot really propagate this ideas through isolated projects. So I will tell you a bit about the municipalities that we helped and how it went. But yeah, it's definitely needed to have a coherent digitalization strategy, or actually digital transformation strategy that puts emphasis on open source in order to have it propagated in the local governments. As I mentioned, some municipalities experimented with open source platforms and tools, and I will just go a bit into that after I'm also going to present you the challenges we bumped into. So throughout time, different municipalities came to us asking for our help to develop or implement different solutions. But in Romania, a great challenge when it comes to open source adoption is the procurement rules. So here, as opposed to Sweden, because I was listening to Thomas earlier, here you cannot just take a tool and use it. You have to go through a whole bureaucratic procedure of actually procuring that tool, even though, for instance, we as an organization provide tools that we build for free, so free of charge. The municipalities do not have to pay us to provide them with tools. However, this actually in some cases it came as a challenge, because municipalities cannot use tools that they do not procure. So yeah, this practice usually favors proprietary vendors, especially vendors that are old in the market, let's say, and that even though they are not the most committed or good, well-intended people, they are still getting the contracts for the municipalities because they are trusted, because they are big. So there's also cultural resistance to change, to go to something new, and it's better safe with the big vendors, you know. And also another challenge that was also mentioned earlier is the fragmentation. So because we do not really have a central authority that says, hey, starting from tomorrow, you will need to embed in your software the fact that it has to be open source or reusable, or so on and so forth. So because no one is actually implementing in reality the principles that the European Union has over this regard, this doesn't really comes into the local government. So now a bit about our experience with implementing open source in local governments. As it was mentioned earlier, we helped different municipalities here in Romania to implement tools meant to help them achieve different goals. So for instance, I think it's more than 3. Yeah, I think it's 4 or 5 years already since we did the first implementation of a participatory budgeting tool, which is part of the Consul Democracy ecosystem. It's a tool that was needed by some local municipalities here in Romania, and it was successfully implemented for over 3 editions in 3 of them. So, for instance, here in Romania, we are also in the beginning of getting more and more participatory practices, let's say. So these tools actually facilitated these processes to happen, because otherwise it would have been very difficult to implement such a project. So the way we did it was basically that we held hands. So here, what worked for adoption was actually holding their hands a lot and making them become confident in their powers. Because and I think it's not only the case of Romania, it's probably the case of multiple local municipalities that are smaller. They do not have technical capacity at all. They do not have technical people, or if they do, those technical people are not necessarily doing just that job. So usually you have people that need a lot of training and they need a lot of support. It's not that they are not well intended or that they don't want to. They just simply need all the support that they could get. So in our case, this is how we implemented participatory budgeting, the participatory budgeting tool. So basically, we helped them configure it, install it, and afterwards, after the first 2 rounds, they started to become more and more independent. So each year we could see an improvement of people using the tool by themselves and only asking us questions that they couldn't answer, or things that they bumped into then that they didn't know how to solve by consulting the documentation. So in our experience so far, this is what worked a lot, holding their hands, and also offering them explanations in a language that they could understand, because this is another thing that happens with some other vendors. They do not try to empathize a lot with their users, which in this case are people that are not necessarily tech savvy and that need a lot of explanations that do not intimidate them. Because if you come and throw technology at people, they will become skeptical. And it's very much needed to make sure that you also have this embedded in the adoption strategy. And this is the tools that we implemented from the Consul Democracy ecosystem. It's just a successful story. We also had other tools such as Website Factory, which is a tool that we've built, and it's basically an open source website builder created for people that are not tech savvy enough to use WordPress or other tools that build websites. And it's just another example. Way forward. So what should we do next? And when I say that, I don't refer only to us as an organization, but also as you as participants or other people that are interested in open source in local government. So basically, so far in Romania, what what we could observe that worked was the fact that when a municipality had a successful story and they shared it with another, it helped them actually relate more to the experience and and made them more curious and more interested in adopting such practices. So sharing good practices from like other cities internationally and within the European frameworks, I think it can really bring a lot of benefit in the adoption. Then what I mentioned earlier, training and capacity building for public servants. So these people really need to be held hands until they become confident and independent, and until they understand the benefits of open source. Building local open source communities around municipalities. This is also something that I saw in the case of the other countries. I didn't necessarily see it here in Romania, outside of the municipalities that we helped and outside of the people that were actually interested in the whole process. But I think it's something that could definitely happen, and encouraging pilot projects to demonstrate value. So even though the resources sometimes may be scarce, just trying something out and piloting it may seem like a good reason enough for others to try it too. So yeah, this is so far how we see it further. And conclusions. Well, I really trust that once, in our case, in Romania's case, the governmental authority will understand much better the benefits of open source or adoption. They will actually be able to create strategies that bring adoption through local governments, because isolated initiatives starting from the civil society, which can definitely not substitute what an authority should do, are not enough. So we are here to help. We've been open, flexible, and available for these initiatives, and this is our mission. But I really think that a governmental intervention is needed for like even bigger progress. So I'm gonna stop now because I want you to ask me questions. I think I went over time a bit, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Miruna. Great. We're going to go into our panel discussion soon, but does anybody have any quick clarifying kind of questions for Miruna? Anything that was unclear that you'd like to ask? If so, please just type it in the chat. Otherwise, we'll move straight on into our panel discussion. And we'll also invite some question and answer for the overall panel. Okay, while we're waiting for that, I will invite Johan and Thomas to come back on screen for the panel. While they're doing that, Miruna, I think we have one question for you, which is to increase the credibility of your solutions. What concrete measures have you taken?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in the case of our solutions, we tried to make sure that whatever we are building is anchored in reality. So we made sure that the credibility is this was our strategy so far. We tried to build credibility by actually staying near the users at all points. So what we build, we are also maintaining, because if we are only building and we are not making sure that whatever we are building is going to survive after, then you are going to lose credibility. So making sure that we also have a maintenance plan and strategy helped us increase this credibility. I hope I answered your questions. I can go into more detail if needed.
Great. It looks like it did. Okay, so I will move into our panel discussion. If you have any questions, please feel free to start typing them in the chat. I have a few questions of my own for our panelists, and then we'll go to some of the questions that you all have. So we'll try and make this as engaging and interactive as possible. Okay, so Johan, Miruna, Thomas, thank you all for your thoughtful insights. I wanted to come back to some of the core findings of the study and kind of talk about it in the context of some of the challenges and successes that you all highlighted. So in our paper, we identify a number of different collaboration archetypes, whether it's from local governments using external capabilities through associations like OS2 or Sambruk, to kind of quasi-internal models like Prox Operator ICT, or even looking at the role of civil society suppliers like Code for Romania or Danesian of Dan. Looking at your own experiences working in these contexts, do you think any particular archetype, whether it's from the kind of community or public sector or supplier perspective, offers the most kind of opportunity in terms of scaling open source adoption and reuse in the local government context?
Yeah, from Sambruk's perspective, I'm a little bit biased, you could say, since our organization, of course, think we excel in this area. But to be quite frank, I think it is a very good way of working together. Yeah, it works really well, and we have a lot of things to develop, but we have a good foundation to start with, I think. So if you don't have that kind of organization, I really think that that's worth considering. Yeah.
A quick follow-up to that, Thomas, what do you think are some of the real benefits of the association model in terms of helping to support local government capacity?
Yeah, let's say they don't need to know a lot of things about what we are discussing today. Actually, since they can outsource that to this association, to know stuff about open source, to know stuff about analyzing SBOMs and intake processes and whatever. It's quite nerdy knowledge, and you need to fund to fund someone who can really dive into it, because it's really, really important. But every organization cannot develop that kind of knowledge. That's why I think it's vital that you channel the money to someone who can.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, obviously, I think, as the study authors, we believe that all of the archetypes are kind of important and overlapping. But yeah, Johan, Miruna, do you see anyone as being particularly influential in terms of kind of scaling these types of collaborations?
Miruna, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, because I think it depends. I think it also depends a lot on the country and the context, because, for instance, I could see how projects similar to what we've implemented in Romania went in other countries. And I think there's also difference in understanding what open source is, benefits, and so on and so forth. So I personally, I wouldn't say that it's just one way to promise scaling and adoption. I think it depends a lot on many other factors and contexts, really.
Yeah, I think that was a real lesson for us. Yeah, Johan, you wanted to say something?
No, just plus one on that. I mean, it depends. It depends on the capabilities of the municipalities present. It depends on the tradition, what existing collaboration structures are there. If there are leading municipalities that have been driving this change for time. I mean, culture and ways of doing procurement and collaboration. There's a lot of depends, and really to highlight that these collaboration archetypes, as we call them, they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, there will be there are shades of gray and spectrums between, and typically you maybe will transition from one way of work and collaborating to another. Maybe you start out with relying on external capabilities, and then as you grow, mature, you build more internal capabilities, you become more engaged and so on, and maybe you start out in a local collaboration which grows to a national collaboration, transitioning into a national municipal association, which then maybe grows out of that suit into an international context where an international foundation is needed. We've seen this transition with the council case, where the council case also allows for more decentralized communities in a way in the various countries, which has different rules or legislations, traditions, and cultures of doing participatory citizen participation and democracy. So yeah, it really depends, and these are not mutually exclusive and can transcend as time evolves.
Great, thank you all. Yeah, I think one of the tensions we saw in the study was kind of the incentives for actually implementing an open source project versus the long-term capacity needed to sustain that and kind of the levels of investment that are required. So we often saw that many governments are focused on kind of immediate needs, and that leads to very specific use cases. And then they start sharing those projects internationally or kind of with other municipalities. On the other hand, sometimes you also see kind of very influential chief technology officers or open source program offices that kind of are leading the charge on a number of different use cases. So in terms of like convincing municipalities to make that effort to invest in open source, like, how do you make the kind of business case for this extra effort up front, and what are the kind of the long-term considerations in terms of building capacity to implement and sustain these types of collaborations?
I can start, if I may.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so in our case, because I'm a bit biased because I'm a strong believer in open source and enthusiast. So I'm trying my best to explain to everyone how good it is. So I think because in our case, and I'm gonna talk about Romania, especially because my experience is very much based in this scenario. So because here we don't really have a lot of people understanding technology in municipalities, sometimes it's difficult to make them understand that open source doesn't mean that because a lot of them, I'm just going to give you an example, a lot of them are skeptical about open source because they think it's unsecure. This is a real thing that I've heard, and because people do not understand really how it actually works, and they base a lot of their decisions on assumptions. So basically what we are trying to do is to give them not only the reasons why it's good, because we know why it's good and there's studies and everything that count that. It's the European regulations that suggest that it's good. So it's not like it's us saying that, it's a lot of other people saying that. And also we are trying to show them other municipalities that did the same, or other good practices that did the same. And once they see how others succeeded, they are also building trust in it. So this usually worked. Also, another thing that that worked was making them, especially the ones that were vendor locked, they could immediately see why open source is better, because the chances to get vendor locked are lower. And if that doesn't happen, then you can you are not stuck into situations that you don't want to be stuck in, and expensive contracts and so on and so forth. Because in our case, a lot of them got into contracts where the product that was delivered and which was not open source was buggy, was not functioning, and the maintenance contracts afterwards were a lot more expensive. And they basically, seeing how much budget they could actually save up if they were choosing an already existing solution that was maintained already, then they could really see the benefit. So I think this is from our experience.
Yeah, so just to summarize, some like really simple and accessible entry points, demonstrating very clear benefits, debunking some of the myths that people have, explaining it in terms that make sense to them. Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. Thomas, do you have any other thoughts on how to sustain that energy, or how to keep building the types of capacity that these municipalities need to sustain these solutions long term? Or Johan, feel free to come in as well.
Yeah, I can just add that typically it's avoid talking about municipalities. They want solutions for their use case, and you shouldn't start out with talking about open source. It's talking about that there are different solutions, and some solutions offer better options in terms of promoting, enabling interoperability, or promoting strategic autonomy, sovereignty, and allows for collaboration and co-procurement. And these tools, these applications are called something called open source. And then when you procure these open source based products, you need to think about their sustainability, and then there are ways of handling that. And then you maybe can contact your supplier or these associations that can help you with this. So think about the local governments just want things to work, and then that can be open source or not open source in their minds. But talking about what these open source alternatives can bring in terms of, for example, as I said, interoperability, autonomy, and so on.
Great, thank you, Johan. Thomas, you posted a link in the chat about procurement. Could you maybe talk a little bit around kind of the procurement issue and some lessons you've learned around working with municipalities to kind of sustain these type of collaborations long term through procurement models?
Yeah, I can just say some words. I prompted out something when I compared Swedish procurement regulations with Romania, since Miruna was here, and I thought maybe isn't that applicable there too? But it could be a hallucination also, so be aware to read the text there. But I think it might be applicable. Since we as an organization fulfill a number of control criteria in order to use these exceptions, then we can procure for our members. But there is you need to consider certain aspects that the members need to have control over the organization, and a number of other things that you need to fulfill in order to use this one. But it is worth considering. We have a lot of use of it in Sweden, and I think it is applicable to a lot of other European countries.
Great. Did anyone else that's on the line have any questions that they wanted to ask? If you do, please feel free to come off mute and ask it, or you can post it in the chat. And you can raise your hand. It's right next to the open chat function in the Jitsi toolbar. Great. Well, while we're waiting for that, I did have, one other question that I wanted to ask you all, which is really just when you look at kind of all the activity that's happening at the local government level, I think we see a lot of activity, but I think we see very different ways in which it's happening. And so why we tried to identify the archetypes and these different models of collaboration, whether it's foundations or associations, is that there's just many different ways that this type of collaboration happens. So looking at all those different models, is there any particular area where you see energy being directed that you think is most productive, or is there anything really that just gives you kind of hope for the future of adoption and reuse of open source software at this level?
I can add. I think one thing that came out as a theme from this report that I didn't really anticipate to the level it did was the importance of foundations, associations, or stewards. In open source communities, in the open source ecosystem, looking at communities and industry, the open source foundations or stewards play a pivotal role for projects to mature and sustain themselves long term. We're having different organizations, legal entities collaborating, ensuring an open governance and so on, even though open community models do function as well, of course. But it really looks like this public stewardship model that is exemplified by the municipal associations and international foundations as council, it really plays an important role. So it's this. I think this raises the question if we need more of these formalized, more public sector-oriented stewardship organizations, because, or if we can use the ones existing maybe more in general infrastructure and industry, like we have Eclipse, Linux, Apache, and so on. We need other more focused on broader civil society, application focused public services. And typically the large projects that have grown into international foundations, they are very application specific, like DSD, like Consul, like GVSig. While these on the national level, they are more general, have multiple products such as Sambruk and OS2. So I think that's a model that is showing promise, and it's going to be interesting to see how that develops.
Yeah, I'll jump in a little bit too while I wait for the others to formulate their thoughts, but I think it really depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? So I think for these very application-specific models that are really dependent on kind of mobilizing civil society attention or bringing together large communities, the foundation model does really work. We see that a lot with the digital public goods movement that's very successful internationally and is beginning to take off in Europe. On the other hand, where I actually see some of the most potential is kind of in these association or these kind of public service supplier models. So the association model is really interesting because it allows you to focus on really interesting use cases. For example, kind of low tech, PCs and putting kind of library systems and making them readily available to municipalities. That's something that I think an association is well positioned to do. Especially for governments with lower capacity to manage these applications themselves. On the other hand, some of the biggest and most successful innovation you see happening is by these like public service suppliers that are kind of quasi-public, but actually have the ability to kind of make a profit, so to speak, and to really kind of actually do engagement across borders, which is quite interesting as well. So I'm talking about Operator ICT from Prague here, but also you have examples at the national level like PagoPA in Italy. So I see a lot of kind of capacity building that's happening in those institutions, and then they also function kind of like OSPOs, and they can start engaging in some of these conversations as well. Miruna, Thomas, any last thoughts before we start to wrap up here?
No, I'm out of words.
No worries. It's been a long 2 hours. I think we did have one last question that I saw in the chat, which I thought was interesting. So I'll end on this, which is, I guess in general, my question is, do governments pay attention to the licenses and their degree of freedoms, in terms of, your engagement with governments? Are they, very engaged on the question of licensing, and how do you deal that in your conversations with them?
I think it depends a lot on their literacy, really, and who is actually starting the process. Because I'm going to give you an example. You may have local governments where they actually have people with previous experiences in getting software, even if it means building it or like procuring it and so on and so forth. And those people might, in the case of Romania, I'm not talking about other countries because I'm not familiar with how it works with other local governments really, but here it depends a lot on their experience. So if they had a previous experience of doing this before, they will probably hire someone to like make them an assessment and to help them draft the requirements that also may include licenses and the degree of their freedoms. This is the happy scenario. There are a lot of other scenarios in which these people basically do not really understand what a license is or how it should work or how it would benefit them. So they don't really take it into account. They just want their product to work and get done with it, and that's it. So I think it depends a lot, really.
Great.
On
Yeah. Johan, anything else you wanted to say about that, or?
No, I can just add that it's, as Miruna says, it's about their understanding, but it's also the need of understanding. Each municipality doesn't have to understand. But the body engaging with the community needs to understand. So if everyone is engaging for an association, they need the understanding.
Great. Well, I guess I will begin to wrap us all up here. So thank you so much for joining our long and comprehensive, but I hope very entertaining and informative webinar about open source in local governments. Just to kind of reiterate, we have published the findings of this report on the Open Source Observatory just a couple of days ago. So if you go to OSOR.eu, you will find the report. It's in the news section, but you can also find it in our Knowledge Center under Reports and Guidelines. We can post that in the chat too. The full report is available and it features abbreviated versions of the 5 case studies that we featured earlier, but we'll also soon be publishing more detailed versions of the case studies, and those include kind of more quotes and kind of detailed insights for you all to explore. And we'll be publishing those in the coming weeks as HTML versions on the OSOR Knowledge Center as well, so that you can explore more with some of the ideas and the concepts that we've talked about. Moving forward, open source in local governments is going to be a big theme for OSOR, hopefully, and so you can stay tuned to our news and events where we'll talk a lot about this theme moving forward and hopefully share news and insights from public sector organizations working at the local level across Europe. I want to thank all of our speakers for joining us today. So thank you to Miruna from Code for Romania, Thomas from Sambruk, Johan from RISE, and to our organizing team at Wavestone. Did anyone at Wavestone want to say anything else as we wrap up this call?
Congratulations for organizing this webinar.
Thank you so much. Well, yes, we'll see you all online. Please stay engaged, and thank you so much for your participation.
Just quickly, Nick, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Finally. Yes. So before everyone leaves, just know that there will be also a next workshop that will be actually on procurement. So you feel free to join. I will also send the link to register. And after this event, we will share the presentation of our speakers, but as well the link to the study that was presented today, and also a detail of the upcoming workshops. So thank you everyone for joining.
Yes, don't miss, make sure not to miss that workshop, and yeah, stay tuned to OSOR. Talk to you all soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.